The motel sat just off the highway, the kind of place that glowed a sickly orange at night from buzzing neon signs and flickering parking lot lamps. Alex hadn't planned to stop, but exhaustion made the decision for him. He pulled into the lot just after midnight, engine rattling, headlights carving through rows of cracked asphalt and faded parking lines. Inside the office, the clerk barely looked up. He slid a clipboard across the counter, asked for a signature, and handed over to brass keys attached to cheap plastic tags. Room 12 was printed in white letters on one. The other tag read simply, "Oh." Alex frowned. "I think you gave me an extra," he started, but the clerk had already turned back to his tiny television, volume hissing through static. Too tired to argue, Alex pocketed both keys and headed down the exterior walkway. Room 12 was at the far end. The door stuck, but after a hard shove it gave way to a stale, carpeted space that smelled faintly of bleach and cigarette smoke. A single lamp lit the room. Sheets were stiff. It was everything he expected, nothing more. He tossed the keys on the nightstand, but the brass tag marked O kept catching his eye, reflecting the glow of the lamp. There was no room O on the map taped behind the door. The rooms were numbered in a neat line, 1 through 14, no gaps, no zero. He told himself it was a mistake, maybe a storage room. Maybe the clerk had slipped it in by accident. But when he stepped outside for air, he noticed something at the end of the upper walkway. A door with no number, repainted more recently than the others. Its knob gleamed faintly under the buzzing fluorescent light. Alex's stomach tightened. He tried to ignore it, but his hand brushed against the second key in his pocket. The teeth of it felt sharp against his palm, almost expectant. By the time he realized, he was walking toward the door. It was already too late to convince himself otherwise. The brass slid into the lock with perfect ease. The door clicked open without resistance. No heavy latch, no rust, no squeal of metal like the others. It was too smooth, as if the lock had been oiled recently, used often, inside. The air was different, not stale, not chemical clean like room 12. It was warmer, heavier, carrying a faint smell of old paper and dust, like the inside of an abandoned library. The lamp overhead buzzed when he flicked the switch, but the bulb barely lit the corners. The room wasn't a motel room at all. No bed, no TV, no beige carpet. Instead, the walls were raw concrete, bare and gray, as if the space had never been finished. A single wooden chair sat in the center, angled slightly toward the door, waiting. The sight of it made Alex's chest tighten. There was nothing objectively wrong about an empty room with a chair, and yet he felt like he had stepped into a place he wasn't supposed to see. He pulled the door shut, heart pounding, but the second he turned back toward room 12, the sound froze him in place. A faint scrape. Chair legs dragging across concrete. He didn't breathe. He didn't move. The hall was empty, the parking lot silent except for the hum of neon. Slowly, his eyes slid to the door of O. It was shut tight. No movement, no shadow. But he could still hear it, the whisper of wood against stone, as if someone were shifting the chair across the floor inside. Alex backed away, forcing his legs to carry him back to room 12. He locked the door, pushed the dresser against it, and sat awake for hours. Every creak of the building made him jolt. At some point, exhaustion won. He fell into a shallow, broken sleep, and when morning came, pale light seeping through the blinds, he almost convinced himself he had dreamed it all. But when he stepped outside, the world offered proof he hadn't asked for. There were faint drag marks on the concrete walkway, just outside room O along uneven lines. Like something heavy had been pulled across the surface during the night. The marks led directly to the railing, then stopped. He leaned over, half expecting to see something dangling below, but the space under the walkway was empty, just gravel and weeds. Back in the office, the clerk barely glanced at him as he slid the key for room 12 across the counter. Alex hesitated, then placed the brass key 4-0 beside it. The clerk's eyes flicked down. His hand froze for the briefest second before sweeping both keys into a drawer. Without a word, he shut it. Alex waited for him to explain, to ask, to react. Nothing. The TV hissed with static, drowning out the silence. On his way out, Alex glanced back once more. The clerk was staring at him, unblinking, as if making sure he really left. Alex told himself to forget it. He drove 2 hours down the highway, bought coffee at a gas station, let the sun warm the inside of his car. The world looked normal again. The motel faded to the edges of his thoughts, becoming one of those strange, sleepless night memories you file away and never revisit. But by evening, he realized he couldn't let it go. The image of the chair in that bare room, the drag marks across the walkway, the way the clerk had frozen at the sight of the brass key, it all pressed down on him, relentless, like a weight he couldn't shake off. By midnight, Alex had turned back. The motel lot looked emptier than before. Only a single car sat under the flickering lamps, dust covering its hood. The neon sign hummed and buzzed, but half the letters were dark now, as if the building itself was trying to vanish. The office window glowed faintly, yet the desk inside was empty. No clerk, no sound. The TV still hissed on the counter, static filling the room. Alex walked the upper walkway. His steps felt loud against the concrete. Rooms 1 through 14 sat silent, curtains drawn tight. And then he reached a true mole. This time, the key wasn't in his pocket. The door was shut, but the knob hung slightly crooked, as if it had been forced. His hand trembled as he tried it. It turned easily. Inside, the same chair sat in the middle of the bare concrete room. Only now it wasn't empty. A folder rested on the seat, fat with paper. He hesitated before pulling it open, the smell of dust and old ink hitting him at once. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, blurry motel hallways, empty parking lots, faces of guests caught off guard, eating, sleeping, unlocking their doors. Every image was stamped with a number and a date. Alex's chest tightened as he flipped further. There was his own face, clear as day, stepping out of room 12 the night before, looking straight at the camera. The timestamp showed 2:37 a.m. He hadn't even been awake at that time. A sudden noise made him jolt, the scrape of a chair leg across concrete. But the chair in front of him hadn't moved. The sound was behind him. He turned sharply. In the far corner of the room, half hidden by shadow, another chair sat pressed against the wall. This one wasn't empty either. A tripod stood on it, and fixed to the tripod was a small black camera, its red light blinking steadily. Alex stumbled backward, folder clutched tight, heart slamming against his ribs. He knew he had to leave right then, before whoever set this up returned, but as he reached for the door, he noticed something carved into the wood from the inside, a line of numbers and initials, scratched deep, repeated dozens of times, like a record. Dates, names, guests who had passed through this motel long beforehand, and at the very bottom, fresh and sharp, was his own name. The door slammed shut behind him. The first time Alex noticed the light, it was almost midnight. A faint glow slipped through the crack under the door across the hall, where apartment 6B sat sealed and supposedly empty. For months, that door had been lifeless, paint chipped, mailbox taped shut, no footsteps, no voices. But that night, a dull yellow flickered beneath it, pulsing irregularly, like a lamp being switched on and off. At first, he dismissed it. Old wiring, maybe. The building was known for creaking pipes and humming radiators. But when he stepped out to drop his trash, he saw something else, a paper grocery bag leaning neatly against the doorframe of 6D. Apples, bread, a carton of milk, all fresh enough that condensation still ran down the sides. Alex froze. He had lived here nearly a year and never once seen anyone unlock that door. The landlord had told him the unit was vacant, under renovation, not fit to be rented. And yet, someone was stalking it like home. The next day, he checked again. The bag was gone. The light was off. The hallway looked as bland and lifeless as always. But from that night forward, things changed. Once or twice a week, groceries appeared, fruit, canned food, sometimes even flowers. He started to notice movement too. The faint tremor of a curtain shifting behind the window of 6B when he came home late. Or the unmistakable scrape of furniture dragging against the floor at hours. It wasn't just the sounds, it was the timing, always when the building was at its quietest, always when he was alone in the hall. He thought about asking the landlord, but some instinct stopped him. Instead, Alex began paying attention. He kept his ear pressed to his own door after dark, waiting. Some nights there was nothing, other nights he swore he heard a voice, too low to make out, murmuring like someone on the phone. One evening, after weeks of restless watching, he heard something different. 3 sharp knocks from inside 6B, not against the door, but from deep within, like a signal echoing through empty rooms. And for the first time, he realized something that hadn't crossed his mind before. Vacant apartments don't knock back. Alex started counting how many nights the light flickered, how often the bags appeared. He wrote it all down in the notebook he usually used for bills, neat columns of dates and times. At first, it felt obsessive, maybe even a little paranoid. But the more he tracked it, the more a pattern emerged. Mondays, Thursdays, sometimes Saturdays. Always late. Always when most of the building was asleep. The strangest detail wasn't the food or the glow, it was the silence. Even the liveliest apartments bleed sound through old walls, televisions, plumbing, footsteps, arguments muffled behind plaster. But 6B was different. It gave nothing. When he pressed his ear to the wall that divided his living room from the vacant unit, it was like pressing it to a grave. No hum of an outlet, no hollow creak of boards, no rush of air vents. Just stillness. And yet, at unpredictable hours, the signs returned, a shadow against the curtain, the faint click of locks turning from inside, the sharp metallic scrape of something heavy dragged across a wooden floor. He tried to catch whoever it was. Once, when he saw the grocery bag sitting outside, he rushed downstairs to wait in the lobby, pretending to scroll his phone. 20 minutes passed, then 40. No one came or went. When he returned upstairs, the bag was gone. Another time, he left his own door cracked open. From the couch, he had a perfect view of the hallway. He sat in darkness, watching, his chest tight with anticipation. The corridor remained still. Nothing but the faint hum of the exit light at the end, his eyes blurred, heavy with exhaustion. Until he finally gave in and dozed. When he woke, his door was still ajar, the hallway still empty. But outside 6B, a bag of groceries rested neatly against the frame, new, fresh, and touched. That was when he realized it wasn't just about the apartment. Whoever was in there knew when he was watching. The paranoia leaked into his days. At work, he replayed the sounds in his head, convincing himself that he could tell the difference between furniture being moved and something else being dragged. In the supermarket, he caught himself scanning carts for the same items that had appeared in the hallway. Apples, bread, milk, canned soup. Always ordinary things. But ordinary things repeated enough start to look like a pattern. He considered knocking just once to see if someone answered, but every time he pictured his knuckles on that faded wood, he felt a cold certainty rise in his throat. If someone opened the door, he might not like what he saw. Then, one Thursday night, he woke to a new sound, not the scrape of furniture or the shuffle of unseen feet. This was closer, clearer, a faint, steady drip. It seemed to come from the wall behind his bed, seeping through the plaster. Rhythmic as a metronome, he pressed his palm flat to the paint. It was damp. The next morning, When he opened his door, there was no grocery bag waiting, only a dark stain spreading outward from the base of 6B's door, thin and irregular, soaking slowly into the hallway carpet. Alex stared at the stain outside 6B for a long time. It had grown overnight, a slick outline that spread like a shadow on the hallway carpet. It didn't smell sharp or metallic, the way he feared it would. Instead, it carried a faint sourness, like standing water left too long in a bucket. He told himself to report it. That was the normal thing to do. He even reached for his phone, thumb hovering over the building superintendent's number. But the longer he stood there, the more another thought gnawed at him. If someone was finally careless enough to let something leak out, it might be the only chance to know for sure what was happening inside. The idea burned hot in his head all day, at work, at the store, even in the shower. Every sound around him seemed to fade under the pressure of that one thought. Check the apartment. That night, after most of the building had gone quiet, he gave in. The lock on 6D was old, the kind you could open with enough patience and a thin strip of metal. His hands trembled as he slid the tool into place, every scrape sounding too loud in the silence of the hall. It took longer than it should have. He almost gave up twice. But then, with a soft click, the door gave. Inside, the air was wrong, stale, humid, tinged with rot. He stepped carefully, holding his breath, trying not to notice the way the floor sagged faintly under his weight. The apartment wasn't empty. Boxes lined the walls, stacked high, each sealed neatly with tape. The labels weren't names or addresses, but dates, month and year, written in precise black marker. Some of the stacks reached almost to the ceiling, creating narrow corridors that forced him deeper inside. On the kitchen counter sat an open grocery bag, the same kind he had seen outside the door. Inside, fruit was already turning soft, leaking sweet liquid that dripped down the plastic and onto the tile. The sound of it was steady and sharp in the quiet, the same drip he had heard through his bedroom wall. He tried not to look too closely, but something about the boxes pulled his attention. Curiosity overrode fear. He reached for one, hands shaking, and tore away the tape. Inside wasn't clothing or books. It was photographs, hundreds of them, stacks and stacks, each bundle tied neatly with twine. The first stack he opened was faces, unfamiliar people caught mid-smile, mid-walk, some glancing at the camera in surprise, different backgrounds, different seasons. Every photo felt like it had been taken in secret. The second bundle was worse. The same faces, but not smiling anymore, eyes closed, skin slack, angles wrong, positions unnatural. The light in the photos was dim, shadowed, like they'd been taken indoors, under a single weak bulb. Alex dropped the stack, his stomach lurching. Behind him, the door clicked shut. He froze. For a long moment, there was nothing, no movement, just the sound of the fruit dripping onto towel. And then, slow and steady footsteps moved through the apartment, not toward him, around him, circling, the way someone might pace to remind you that you're not alone. Alex didn't remember leaving. He didn't remember how he made it back into his own apartment, or how long he sat on the floor staring at the wall he shared with 6B. The only thing he remembered clearly was the sound of that steady drip, following him even into his dreams. The next morning, when he gathered the courage to look, the stain outside 6B was gone. The carpet was clean as if it had never been there, and the door was locked tight again. No one in the building mentioned anything, no one admitted to hearing a thing, and Alex never checked the bags again. The padlock wasn't supposed to be warm, but when Alex touched it, the metal felt strangely alive against his skin, almost like it had been held in someone's hand only moments before. He had been standing there for nearly 10 minutes, staring at the door of Unit 47, the storage space his late uncle left behind in his will. The rest of the inheritance had been nothing but paperwork and unpaid bills. This was the one thing Alex hadn't touched yet. The one thing everyone in the family told him to forget about. The hallway of the storage facility was silent, rows of identical corrugated metal doors stretching into fluorescent emptiness. His footsteps echoed too loudly against the concrete. When the lock finally snapped open, it felt heavier than it should. He tugged the metal door upward, expecting the usual smell of mold, dust, maybe mothballs. Instead, a sharp chemical tang spilled out, bitter, metallic, like old developer fluid from a darkroom. Inside, the unit wasn't filled with furniture or boxes like he'd imagined. Every inch of wall space was covered in pinned photographs, hundreds of them, rows upon rows, overlapping edges, curling corners, some yellowed with age, some glossy and new, and every single one was of him. Alex stood frozen, his breath caught somewhere between disbelief and nausea. Some photos were recent, last week at the gas station near his apartment, the one with the faded red awning. Others reached back years, college, high school, even childhood. In one corner, he saw himself at 15, slumped on a bench after basketball practice, sweat soaking his shirt. In another, he was 23, leaning against his first car outside a diner. Each shot taken from angles he couldn't place, at distances that made no sense, no matter where or when. The lens had always found him, and then he noticed something worse. The newest photographs weren't just pinned on the wall. They were scattered across a small folding table in the middle of the unit, still curled at the edges, as if fresh from printing. The top photo showed him standing exactly where he was now in the hallway. Unlocking Unit 47, his stomach dropped. That picture had been taken tonight. Alex stumbled backward, the photo trembling in his hand. His throat was dry, every nerve buzzing like he'd just touched a live wire. He forced himself to look again, hoping he had imagined it. But no, the shot was perfect, angled from behind his shoulder, capturing the exact moment he slid the key into the lock. Someone had been here tonight, watching him. His first instinct was to bolt, but the hall stretched out into directions, sterile and empty, the fluorescent lights humming with an indifferent rhythm. Whoever had taken the picture could still be near, hidden in the endless rows of units. Camera lens pressed to the shadows. He shut the door quickly, as if that could contain the horror, but the sound of the corrugated metal rattling back down only deepened his dread. He stood there, hand still on the handle, trying to breathe evenly, telling himself he was overreacting. And then he remembered. The padlock had been worn. Alex forced himself back inside. He couldn't stop now. The folding table was cluttered not just with photos, but with manila folders stacked unevenly, some of them bulging, others labeled with dates that stretched back decades. His name appeared on the most recent folder, scrawled in blocky handwriting. He opened it. Inside were receipts, printouts, scraps of paper, a copy of his apartment lease, an old electric bill with his name and address, even a printed screenshot of his social media profile. Every detail of his life catalogued, archived, collected. At the bottom of the stack, folded neatly, was a hand-drawn map. It wasn't of the city or the storage facility, but of his neighborhood, his apartment building circled in red ink, with lines leading to nearby grocery stores, gas stations, even the park where he sometimes jogged. Each location was numbered. Each number matched a set of photographs on the wall. Alex's pulse hammered. He tried to convince himself that his uncle hadn't been the one to do this, that maybe the unit had been broken into, used by someone else. But then his eyes fell on a different folder, one labeled with initials he recognized. His mother's. Inside were photographs of her, grocery shopping, standing at a bus stop, eating dinner by a window he recognized from their old house. Alex slammed it shut. His stomach churned. This wasn't just him. His uncle had been keeping tabs on the entire family. But something didn't fit. His uncle had been dead for 6 months. Yet the photos of Alex, crisp, recent, undeniable, were only days old. Someone was still adding to the collection. And as he scanned the walls again, he noticed one detail that made his blood run cold. An empty spot in the corner, bare wall where the photographs didn't reach, had a single nail hammered in, waiting. A blank frame hung beside it, glass clean, backing paper untouched. It wasn't filled yet, but Alex knew without a shred of doubt what it was meant for. His next photograph. Alex staggered out of the unit, his chest tight, palms slick with sweat. The hallway felt endless now, every shadow alive, every corner a place for someone to stand with a camera raised. He tried to steady his breath, but each exhale came in short bursts, too fast, too shallow. He yanked the door shut, jammed the lock back into place with trembling fingers, and forced himself toward the exit. The fluorescent lights above seemed dimmer than before, buzzing louder, like a swarm of insects, halfway down the hall. He froze. A faint click echoed behind him, mechanical, deliberate, the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. His throat closed. He turned, scanning the corridor. It was empty. The doors sat in their neat metal rows, numbers stenciled in black paint. Not a single one open, not a soul in sight. And yet his skin prickled, as if someone's gaze was crawling all over him. He bolted. The exit door slammed open under his weight, night air rushing in, cold and sour with the smell of asphalt. His car was the only one left in the lot. Its shape hunched under a broken streetlight. He fumbled the keys, dropped them, cursed, then finally threw himself inside, locking the doors, his breath fogging the windshield. For a long moment he just sat there, knuckles white on the steering wheel, forcing himself not to look in the rearview mirror. He didn't want to know if someone was standing behind the car. Finally, he started the engine. Headlights flared, slicing across the lot. And in their beam he caught it, another manila envelope propped neatly against his windshield wiper. He didn't want to touch it. Every nerve screamed at him to drive, to never come back. But his hands moved on their own, pulling it inside. The envelope was thin. Only one photograph inside. Alex stared at it, his stomach hollowing out. It was him, sitting in his car, right now, hands gripping the steering wheel. The angle was perfect, taken from outside the driver's side window. He hadn't seen anyone, he hadn't heard anyone, but the photo was real. The timestamp printed in the corner showed the exact time, 9:14 p.m. He looked up from the picture, heart hammering. And the parking lot was empty. But he knew with a certainty that made his skin crawl that whoever had been watching wasn't gone. They were simply waiting for him to move, camera ready, preparing for the next shot.